I don't know.
Well, yeah. He's full the parole board.
Oh, I can't even...
He's dangerous. He's not...
James Treadwell is Professor of Criminology at Staffordshire University and a former probation officer. Just going on Sue's point there, Professor, I mean, can people change? I mean, is it even possible that somebody who's done something so terrible, horrific? I mean, the words don't even describe what this man did. It's disgusting. But is there any world where these people can change and we can accept them back on our streets?
Good morning, Adam. Yeah, I think it's a really difficult one because in the case of Pitchfork, I don't think he's changed and I don't think he can change. And one of the things I'm keen to suggest is that we shouldn't view all cases in some ways as alike, as murder is murder, because there are very different degrees. And to be honest with Pitchfork, I don't think he is a man who should ever have been released from prison. I think there was a failing initially to give him a whole life tariff, and that is exactly the sort of sentence that's needed for him. He needs to spend the entirety of his life in custody. But of course, when you find people guilty of murder, we also open the door to people committing the same offence who are 17, 15, 16-year-old boys who are killing other young boys on inner city estates. And I think it's a really important message that we send out societally that you know, if you commit something really grave and heinous, in most instances, and I do say most instances, you can move beyond that and be rehabilitated. But I think that very belief in rehabilitation also requires a belief that some people perhaps are beyond the pale of that work. And when you look at where Pitchfork was as a man and then the offences that he committed, I think that puts him in a category where he is so dangerous that the risk is ever there and he should never be released.
Of course, he was given a life sentence, but unless you are given a whole life order, you are at some point eligible for parole to go out, but you can be, as we've seen, recalled because you breached your licence conditions. But once you've breached those conditions, how likely is it that someone who's been convicted of these 2 rapes and murders of children, I mean, they were children, 2 15-year-old girls, how likely is it that that person then gets another chance?
Yeah, I think that is the problem, because legally here, under his current sentence, he will get another chance. The parole board will be asked to, again, at some point, make a judgment about whether Pitchfork is safe to be released into the community, because he has that right to ask for it. And I think that's why it's completely right that we are having that conversation today about rebalancing and whether the needs for public protection in some instances override those of the individual's right to be at liberty again. And there is a background to this whereby, it's because his sentence was prior to 2003 and subsequent to 2003, anyone who'd committed the types of offences that he has committed would never get a second chance. But that to me suggests that there is this gap with a small number of offenders, and that's such a serious gap that considered in there is Ian Huntley, who I'm sure your viewers will have heard of. You know, these are people that could at some point be released again, and I think that the public quite rightly finds that appalling.
And Sue, you must find it appalling that if he'd been convicted after the change in the rules in 2003, he might never have been released from prison.
Yes, definitely. All child killers should get life, and it should mean life. They shouldn't be allowed to get away. No, they shouldn't be allowed back out.
Mm. Sue, thank you so much for being with us this morning. We can understand that every development in this story is a pain, is a trauma for you. And Professor James Treadwell, thank you as well. A spokesperson for the parole board said the decision to release Mr. Pitchfork was made back in May and followed consideration of extensive evidence from his community probation officer, his prison probation officer and prison psychologist, who all supported his release.